Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you to Sunday school this morning on the men's side. I was just in the back with the ladies, and they've got us outnumbered for sure. But by faith, we're gonna build here. I wanted to first of all open with prayer. Is there anything we need to be in prayer about that you think should be mentioned here? I do want to point out that Calvin's family went through a medical situation. It was planned. His sister is recovering from a pretty serious treatment, and we're going to keep that family in prayer, and particularly his sister. So we're going to pray for Brother Calvin's sister. Anything else we should mention? I'm going to be thankful for our time of prayer yesterday. We met, some of the guys were here yesterday, I think somewhere around 25 or something like that of us, I would say. And we prayed together. It was a good time. And we're going to do that more regularly. And I'm glad to hear that. But let's go ahead and pray now, and then we'll get started. Father, I'm thankful for your mercies, for your goodness to us, the way you take care of us. We don't even think about it. And yet we wake up this morning, and so much is available to us, like good health, the ability to get here in our right mind, the ability to sit down in a shelter and enjoy you and what you've done, to be able to look into your word. You've just taken care of us in ways that we don't really think about too much in detail. We also want to be thankful for the things that have been on the front of our mind, for the way that you've taken care of Calvin and his family, and particularly his sister, and the treatment she's been going through. We ask for her. We're thankful for her success thus far, health-wise, and we ask for more of that as she recovers. And we pray that you would just reestablish her, and she would be able to take up her responsibilities and enjoy life and carry on as normal before too long. And we'll be sure to thank you for that as well. Lord, we want to thank you for just church family that gets together and prays for one another. And thankful for that time yesterday, and ask that you would help us to continue to lift one another up in prayer. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. I would just, I think most of you have these, but there's a worksheet, not really a worksheet, it's an outline that goes with this morning's lesson. And as you see guys come in, if you just kind of point them to it, I got just a couple up here, and there's some on the table in the back. That would be great. And just to kind of catch you up, if you're not, remind you where we're at. We've been going through the life of Joseph, and we started just over a month ago, I think, and we have come up to chapter 42, where we are today. And we've seen Joseph in a lot of ups and downs, and he's in an up phase right now. He is the second highest person in the land of Egypt, and only Pharaoh is higher than him. And things are good for Joseph, and we're going to see another challenge for him and those around him this morning. I'm going to, at the end of the Sunday school, I'm going to tell you where we're going from here, because the schedule's a little bit choppy, but I'll walk you through it. If you would, though, turn to Genesis chapter 42, and this is really a change in focus a little bit. We've been talking about Joseph, and now it turns to Joseph's family. Joseph is in Egypt, as I mentioned. His family is back in what we would call the Promised Land, but things are not good in the Promised Land. And this chapter starts off with a problem. So basically, just to remind you of our methodology, I'm going to read through, and I'm going to talk until you guys interrupt me. And it's not an interruption. It just make comments or questions. It's much better if this is a bit more of a dialogue than me rolling on. But I get on a roll, you got to stop me sometime, Julius. It's just like, I don't see the breaks very often. So please slow me down and ask questions or make comments. But let's start with verse 1. It says, "Now Jacob, when he saw that there was grain in Egypt, and Jacob said to his sons, 'Why are you staring at one another?' He said, 'Behold, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt, so go down there and buy some for us from that place, so that we may live and not die.'" Now, Jacob seems pretty desperate here. He's using strong language, and it almost sounds insulting a bit in English towards his sons, and in Hebrew it sounds the same way. He's disturbed, and I would say that this is a tone that you're going to see in Jacob throughout this chapter and for a while, that he is very frustrated and very, very depressed sounding. And I don't want to read psychology, I especially don't want to read 21st century psychology into a guy in Egypt, 2,000 to 3,000 years before us. That would be a mistake. But he's in a bad situation, and he's lost a lot, and you can tell just by the words he chooses, right? So verse 3, the 10 brothers of Joseph went down to buy grain from Egypt, but Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he said, I'm afraid that harm may befall him. So the sons of Israel came to buy grain among those who were coming from the famine, to buy grain among those who were coming, for the famine was in the land of Canaan also. I called that the promised land, but it's also known as Canaan. And this is where the boys are coming, where the young men are coming from. But you can see that Jacob holds Benjamin back and keeps Benjamin with him as he sends the brothers. Now, remember, his favorite wife, Rachel, had 2 boys, Joseph and Benjamin. And one of them is presumed dead to everybody in the family. And this is the second and youngest of the 2. And so obviously from what he says, he doesn't want any harm to come to Benjamin. And so he keeps him back. This love for Benjamin is going to be a major catalyst over the next 2 chapters, this chapter and the next chapter. There's some forces that really play here. And one of those is Jacob's love for his son, Benjamin. And again, he sounds frustrated, and he is. The brothers go to down to Egypt, and this is a little crazy because if you read the whole Bible, Egypt is supposed to be a place of trouble that you need to be saved from. It becomes a picture of something that you ought to be saved from. The most obvious is with Moses. But at this point, Egypt as a place of salvation for the people of God is really an unusual thing. And so things are kind of backwards here, it almost seems. And so, yeah, go ahead.
In his mind, there was a hint of fear that what happened, what he thinks happened to Joseph, would actually happen to Benjamin.
Yeah.
If he were to let him go.
A trouble of some kind. I don't think he's necessarily blaming the boys. I don't think he knows that the other 10 did to Joseph what they did. I don't think the fear is that. I just think the fear is if he gets away from me, something bad's going to happen. And quite honestly, that's going to increase as you get through the chapter. And we'll see that. Yeah, I think he's concerned that the same type of thing would happen, right? It says, now Joseph was the ruler over the land. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. Now, we saw last week, I don't know if you remember, Pharaoh said if anybody comes in wanting to buy stuff, wanting to buy our grain that we've been saving up, they got to deal with Joseph. So this is not news. This is predictable that Joseph's going to have to deal with people like his brothers, and in fact his brothers when they come in. Moreover, it's predictable because Joseph predicted it as a young man that his brothers were going to come in and bow down to him. Now, this is not the full completion of that prophecy, but it's certainly a part of it, right? And so this you can look back at Genesis 37:7 and say, well, this is what Joseph was talking about, right? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, it was especially true for foreigners because Egypt saved a lot of grain, as we saw last time, based on the prophecies and the actions that came out of that. And it was said that, they were going to be able to feed Egypt, but if other people wanted it outside of Egyptians, they were going to have to come to Joseph. And so Joseph was in charge of the allotment, and he probably did it systemically. It sounds like he did it systemically for Egyptians. But if you came in as a foreigner, he was going to deal with you sort of one-on-one.
Look at the numbers of how many people he probably have to see, or how long this would take for them to get to Joseph.
Yeah, it was fairly long because we're going to see that not only does this family run out of grain once that sends them down here, they're going to run out of grain twice. And so the famine was long by whatever standards long is at that time. It was long, and it was significantly regional. In the last chapter, it said that it would be worldwide, and typically they don't mean the whole world when they say, but the known world. You know, what we know of the world is experiencing a famine. So it was pretty big region of hunger there. Yeah. Enough so they would predict. It was predictable that foreign nations would come and try to get their grain. Right. So verse 7, when Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he disguised himself to them and spoke to them harshly and said to them, where have you come from? And they said, from the land of Canaan to buy food. But Joseph had recognized his brothers, although they did not recognize him. Joseph remembered the dreams which he had had about them, and he said to them, you are spies, you have come to look at the undefended parts of our land. Now, it's mentioned twice that he knows who they are, but they don't know who he is. I suspect they don't even imagine Joseph could be alive, and that's part of why he's able to go undercover, so to speak. And he's going to use this. He's going to use the fact that they don't recognize him. He's going to manipulate that as well. Later on, we're going to find out he didn't speak with them in their native language, that he used Egyptian and he used a translator, which is another way to throw them off. And so Joseph here is talking really tough to them. He's making false accusations, and he knows that they're false accusations. And we're going to see later that he had a bit of a different disposition. But for right now, he's taking this approach with his brothers. Let me ask you this, because I think this is one of the keys. Why would he do this? Why not just throw your arms around your brothers and say, what you meant for evil, God meant for good, and say it, 10 chapters earlier than he actually does? What does he gain by this, from his perspective, play back and forth with them? They're not having fun, but it's false. What's that? It could be very much revenge. I mean, and you would understand that. They threw you in a hole and sold you to some people and left you for dead. Created evidence that you were dead for your father, and payback would certainly be an option here. Yeah, keep them on the hook for a few chapters. That makes sense to me, and having two brothers, it makes a lot of sense.
I would say too, his appearance had to be altered enough for them not to be able to recognize him, so that he could actually speak to them
right.
in that manner.
Yeah, we're talking about 20 years difference from when around 20 years since they saw him last. That's why this is possible.
The Egyptian dress was different from him.
The whole thing. I mean, even if you thought your brother made it through what you sold him into, you would never expect him to be Pharaoh's right man. So even the concept that Joseph was where he was not in their mind at all, I'm sure. While I like Hank's revenge theory, I don't think that's actually what's going on here. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. But Joseph not only remembers them, he remembers the dreams that he had, and he also saw that God is beginning to fill those prophetic dreams, right? And you guys have ridden with Joseph through his ups and downs. To know that the prophecies of when you were a young man are coming true 20, 25 years later, after you've done this, that must give you some different or reassuring perspective on all that up and down in your life, right? I mean, you may not have felt God at every moment while you were in prison, but to see that he is still there fulfilling the prophecies that he gave you decades ago must let you know that he has been with you all the time, that he's walked with you, that he's with you now. And I got to think that, again, I'm not trying to psychoanalyze him, but think of the reassurance of prophecy that is fulfilled. And that must mean something to him, I would think, in his understanding of who God is and his place in God's plan, that God, whatever it is, God is with him, right?
Testimony for the world, for Christians and the world, those that are not saved or who don't believe, to be able to forgive your brothers, to bring them in and treat them as though nothing ever happened.
Right.
To love them and to weep on their shoulders because you're so glad to see them.
Yeah.
And just treat them like just nothing, like they were just born, and just, what a testimony.
That is a testimony. Yeah, that kind of forgiveness is unimaginable almost. But I would say you're about a chapter and a half early on that he's going to drag them for a while first. You know, we'll get to that, but these guys are not feeling the love right now, I can tell you that, you know.
He could have done it to disguise his emotions too.
Yeah.
He's seeing your family after all these years, he discarded you.
Yeah.
And to see him.
He's definitely hiding his emotions, and you're going to see that more clearly below. Because everything that McKinley just described is within him, but he's not expressing it. Right. Yeah. And you're going to see that more clearly here in a few verses, right? So pick up at 10. It says, they said to him, "No, my Lord, but your servants have come to buy food." So he called them spies. They're saying we're not. We've come to buy food. We're sons of one man. We're honest men. Your servants are not spies. Yet he said to them, "No, but you've come to look at the undefended parts of our land." But they said, "Your servants are 12 brothers in all, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is with our father today, and one is no longer alive." Okay? And so in the middle of giving them the story, you see and the story they tell is the truth. I mean, they're telling the absolute truth. But you see in the middle of their story, Joseph repeats his accusation. And he knows the story is true, and he's just disagreeing to be, I mean, again, what's his motivation? He's definitely being difficult to them, but, you know, he hasn't let on yet what his motivation. And it's interesting how they tell the story, but what I find is most interesting is they haven't forgot about Joseph. He's there at the end of the story saying one of them has died, one of our brothers has died, right? And after all these years, he's still a part of the family story. And I think you can make more of this later, but verse 14, Joseph said to them, "It is as I said to you, you're spies. By this you'll be tested. By the life of Pharaoh," this is kind of a vow, right? "By the life of Pharaoh, you shall not go from this place until your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you that he may get your brother while you remain confined, that your words may be tested whether there is truth in you. But if not, by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies." And so he put them all together in prison for 3 days. Okay, so he's really playing hardball with them, right? He's playing hardball. And again, I want you to think about, why would he be doing this? Why is he doing this? And he's going to leave them there, and it's obvious he's testing them. He's saying, and they're understanding that he is testing their story, whether they're liars or not. But we know Joseph knows they're not lying. It's, you know, he's not interested in whether they're telling the truth or not, even though they think that's what he's saying, and he's playing that part along. He's not really testing if they're lying. He knows they're telling the truth. So what's he testing, if he's testing something?
Could it be because he don't want them to really know who he is? He's acting like a king.
Yeah, it could be. The whole thing could be just to protect himself or hide himself and not let them know, right? I don't think he's testing their honesty like he's pretending to do, but I do think he's testing them. And the first plan, this plan is going to change, but his first plan is to keep all of them in prison, and one of them is going to go and produce this brother that's not there. And if he produces the brother that's not there, then that would validate their story, right? And so part of what he's testing, maybe based on the fact that Benjamin is now the leverage point, right? Benjamin is who they need to see to get out of prison at this point, right? And so going on to verse 18, the plan changes. This is 3 days. Joseph said to them on the third day, do this and live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers be confined in your prison. But as for the rest of you, go and carry grain for the famine for your households, and bring your youngest brother to me, so that your words may be verified and you will not die. And they did so. So, there's a little bit of irony here. They get a small taste of how Joseph's been living. He was in prison, now they're in prison. So there is a little bit of retribution, maybe. But no doubt they were concerned about what was going to happen, and their consciences are probably kicking in a bit. It doesn't say this, but they may be thinking about Joseph. You're going to see that in a minute, I think. And he's already been alluded to in verse 13, and it's going to be explicit here in a minute. But Joseph says that he fears God, and he says that in the context of he didn't want to hurt innocent people, and therefore he's going to let them go back with grain to feed their families. And if they were telling the truth, he would just test them with one of them in prison, not all of them. And they were going to bring Benjamin back and prove what's going on. So yeah, go ahead. Say that again.
Joseph was simply the right-hand man of Pharaoh.
Right.
Not the Joseph, the brother of the
right.
How would he know whoever they brought back was really...
Yeah, they could bring back an imposter, right, is what you're saying. They could bring back anybody and say, this is our brother. Yeah, I thought about that. I don't know how you do that.
Even asked for that.
Yeah.
For the fact that he wanted to see his brother.
Yeah, I mean, they theoretically could have brought anybody back and said, this is our younger brother. Joseph knows he's going to know Benjamin when he sees him. Joseph obviously wants to see Benjamin. But I do think there's something here of a test as well that's going on. I don't know why the idea of a false Benjamin never comes into the story. Because, I don't know why, but it doesn't. Yeah. Yeah.
Was Benjamin born when they sold Joseph into slavery?
Yeah, that I thought about that too. Is Joseph, when they tell their story in front of him here, is this the first time he's hearing about another brother, or did he already know about a younger brother? I think he already knew about a younger brother, and it doesn't really tell. It tells the order in which there's 4 ladies that go into having these children. There's the people he married plus the 2 people he married, Rachel and Leah, plus their 2 handmaidens, and that makes all 12 of these guys. And so it tells the order in which these happen, or the groupings in which this happened, but it doesn't space them out. I tend to think, based on the age of Joseph when he was sold into slavery, and the fact that he was born of the same mother, that Benjamin was already there. In other words, that would have been a large gap for one woman to give birth to Joseph. Joseph grew up, gets sold into slavery, and then she have another son, Benjamin, that he didn't know about. So just that kind of logic makes me think he already knew he had a younger brother, and that the younger brother was from his mother. I think both of those things are true and in his knowledge.
Joseph's dream, how many were?
Yeah, all the brothers are bowing down to him in the dream, and all of those. Yep. Okay, so where am I at? Verse 21. It says, then they said to one another, we are truly guilty concerning our brother, because we saw the distress of his soul when he pleaded with us, yet we would not listen. Therefore, this distress has come upon us. Reuben answered them, saying, did I not tell you, do not sin against this boy, or against the boy, and you would not listen? Now comes the reckoning for his blood. Okay, so this is 20 years after they've done this. Yeah, I mean, you can see that he's squeezing them, and when he squeezes them, what's in comes out, right? And what comes out is guilt. complicit guilt between them of their conspiracy to do what they did with their brother. And I mean, think of the detail of this. That he even reminds them, one of them reminds all of them, they could rehearse Joseph's pleas to stop doing that to him, right? And then they seem to agree, they're all in agreement, it seems like, that we're going through what we're going through because we did what we did, all right? Now notice that connection, right? Guilt and punishment, and it makes sense. I mean, it's even.
That interaction amongst the brothers, that made me think about, when you think about irresistible grace, and I think sometimes it's communicated in a way that's not correct, or at least not helpful. It's like, we say irresistible grace, we say, God is going to draw those, who he has elect, he's going to draw them to himself. And a lot of times we can communicate that in such a way where you got people, God bringing people against their wishes, against their will, so to speak, as opposed to God knowing exactly what circumstances will lead to a certain thing. And so, for example, looking at this situation, Joseph hasn't mentioned anything about what they did.
Right.
But the situation was such that all of them were in agreement that this goes back to, in other words, God brought that came upon their mind, just, what they were going through led them to come to the conclusion, this is related to, what we actually did. And yet, so they're arriving at the very point that God wanted them to be at, but notice, it was by the circumstances leading them to that. God created a situation where, and only he knows the situations that's going to lead you to point A to point B. Right. And it's just fascinating how that comes about.
Yeah, it really is. It's fascinating, and it's also, now I'm not saying Joseph knew what he was doing here exactly, but he knew he wanted to apply pressure on these guys to see what would happen.
Point though, and that's why I pointed out that Joseph didn't say anything about what they did. Right. And so even if whatever, we don't know what his desires were, his rationale for doing whatever. Right. But he had, in other words, he didn't contribute, or he didn't lead them, so to speak, as far as like that's not the end that he was actually leading them to. This is just something based on the circumstances, the Lord pricking their hearts, and it's almost like their eyes were open, like, man, remember what we did way back there.
Yep. And Reuben points out that they first ignored Joseph's cries, and then they ignored his warnings. Okay. And in this story, if you keep reading, Reuben, obviously Reuben is painting himself as a good guy a little bit here, a little bit better than his brothers. But Reuben stands out as sort of a good character in this chapter. And you're going to see him pop up again. But he went along with them at that time. I mean, may have not liked it, but he went along with it. And the idea of Joseph's blood that's mentioned here implies his death. They think they killed him, or he was dead because of their activity. To talk about somebody shedding blood, it doesn't mean you got injured. It means you're dead. And so that's what's going on there. Now, look down in 23. They did not know, however, that Joseph understood, for there was an interpreter between them, and he turned away from them and wept. Okay? So Joseph is privy to this conversation. They think he doesn't know, they think they're talking behind his back in their native tongue. Joseph knows everything. That was his household language. And this thing, to hear what they just said about him and turning him over, the guilt they feel, their conscience kicking in, obviously it broke his heart, and his emotions are coming out, much as McKinley, I think you were pointing out, he has this in him, even if he doesn't let it out. So he keeps this hidden, his emotions hidden. And it goes on, verse 25. But when he returned to them and spoke to them, he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. So they're watching their brother get tied up, handcuffed right in front of them, so to speak. And then Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain and to restore every man's money in his sack and to give them provisions for their journey. And thus it was done for them. So they loaded their donkeys with their grain and departed from there. Now, So this is plan B, sort of. I mean, Joseph's not keeping them all, but he is going to keep Simeon. It doesn't say why he picked Simeon. I'm not sure if there's a reason behind that. There's nothing that sticks out in Simeon that makes me think he's a good candidate, but I don't know. So maybe he was selective on purpose, or maybe Simeon just got the short straw. I don't know. But Joseph still has tricks going on, though. Okay, you might think he's finished with them, but what he does is he has all their grain loaded up. They bought it just like they thought they bought it, and they're about to head out, and he has their money hidden back in their individual luggage packs that they're carrying. And so they're heading off. They think they're done. But Joseph is screwing them to the wall once again. You know, he's going to put pressure on them down the road. And, you know, later they're going to know this is not generosity. They're not going to think, oh, man, that guy's so nice. He gave us our money back. They're like, oh, no, we're in trouble. This is a problem, you know. And so he meant it for a problem. They understood it as a problem. It's not a gift. I think he's using wisdom if you can figure out what his motivation is. I mean, yeah.
So he's doing, it seems to me like he's
right.
doing all this stuff to his brothers, but it's sort of like when you're dealing with your kids, you've done something wrong, and, they think they're going to get off the hook by just getting a pallet and
Right.
get on with it. And it seems like maybe Joseph is like, okay, I'm going to use this to deal. I know the situation, but I'm going to deal with this.
Yeah.
While he's dealing with it, he's still showing emotion.
Right.
Because he's talking.
I think the fact that you see that he's emotionally leaning one way and outwardly leaning another shows that he has a purpose in mind. That he's not just going off his feelings all the time, or revenge, swinging between revenge and love or something. He's not doing that. He has a plan, and this is the next part of his plan to put them in another tight place, right? So, verse 27. This is on their way home. They departed. As one of them opened his sack to give his donkey fodder at the lodging place, he saw his money, and behold, it was in the mouth of his sack. And then he said to his brothers, "My money has been returned, and behold, it's even in my sack." And their hearts sank as they turned trembling to one another, saying, "What is this that God's done to us?" Right? And so, this is a multi-day journey. One of their stopovers, they got to feed the donkeys, and this guy finds money in his bag. And although they didn't know exactly what happened, they knew it meant trouble, right? And it's interesting that they recognize God's hand in this. When they were in prison, they attributed their troubles to what they had done in the past. They didn't really mention God. Okay, but here the trouble is piling up, and at some points they're like, "This is not a coincidence. God hates us," or "What is God doing to us?" or "Why would God do this to us?" and that kind of thing. Now they're mentioning God. If you were with them in prison, you could have said maybe they're talking about karma, but they're not talking about karma. They're talking about God right now. Okay, and they knew they really have two options. They could go back and try to straighten out the situation of why this money was in this one guy's bag. They decided not to go back. Obviously, they go forward and keep going home, right? And so when they came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, they told him what had happened to them, saying, the Lord of the land spoke harshly with us and took us for spies in the country. We said to him, we're honest men, we're not spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no longer alive, and the youngest is with our father today in the land of Canaan. The man, the Lord of the land, this is twice now they're calling Joseph the Lord of the land, said to us, by this I will know you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers with me and take grain for the famine for your households and go. But bring your youngest brother to me that I might know you're not spies, but honest men. I will give your brother to you, and you may trade in the land. And so they believe their honesty was being tested. They told their dad the whole story. And it's just that's just a recounting of where Simeon is not with them, and they need Benjamin to get him back. And they told their dad everything that happened, basically. So 35, now it came about as they were emptying their sacks, behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when they and their father saw these bundles of money, they were dismayed. At first it was one guy, now it's all 10, right? And that's a problem. And everybody knew there was trouble, okay? So what are we gonna do about this? 36, their father Jacob said, you have bereaved me of my children. Now, what does he mean by that? You have bereaved me of my children. He's obviously talking to his sons. Who are the children he's talking about that he's been bereaved of? Joseph and Simeon, right? At least, all right, at this point. You bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more. Simeon's no more. And you would take Benjamin? All these things are against me, okay? So we said at the beginning of the chapter, Jacob is really, he has nothing positive to say. Again, I don't want to diagnose him with clinical depression or something dumb like that, but to say he's been through a hard life, he's feeling it, and every statement he's making right now is an intensification of that thing. I mean, he's remembering the loss of Joseph fresh, right? Like it just happened. Okay, now he's not going to let Benjamin go to Egypt, which is what it'll take to free Simeon. And Jacob realizes he can lose. I mean, you send kids away from the house, anything can happen to him. Anything. He's done it twice, and he's lost 2 kids, right? And Reuben at this point comes in and he says something fairly outrageous. It's Reuben spoke to his father saying, you may put my 2 sons to death if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my care and I'll return him to you. Okay? So Reuben is so sure that he can ensure Benjamin's safety as well as return Simeon that he promises on the lives of his 2 sons. That's a bold statement. That's a bold statement.
I want to say something before you get too far.
Sure.
I was sitting there thinking, and all this going on in that family, and that poor father is suffering.
He really is.
And we need not forget that what Joseph said, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Yeah. There are times in our lives that we might do something, or somebody else may do something, and they may stub their toe and they think God is getting back at them for what they did. Right. Outsiders, we have to be careful not to ever look at anybody's situation and think that they're being punished for something that you might know that they did. Because at that point, you're taking the place of God. God never checks in with me to say, I'm doing such and such over here. And I thank God for that. He's God all by himself, and he deals with situations totally from a mindset that's far beyond McKinley Belcher's. Yeah. And it's amazing the way he does things. And I'm so thankful that he don't check in with nobody to say what he's doing over here. At the same time, he may be changing thousands of lives.
What about David? So David, he said to God, he said, I've sinned against you. Yeah. And I was thinking the same thing. Does that happen in our lives when, we are suffering and we know that we have been disobeyed to God? Does it come to the point where we know exactly why we're being punished?
So,
do we know, does it ever come to a point in our lives when we say, we know this is God is, we are being punished. This is happening because of something that we have done.
So I'm checking my watch because you 2 guys just opened up a huge topic, and I think it's I think it fits in the subject because these guys have a sense of justice, even as perpetrators, right? They have a sense of justice that says, I did this, so I get that. Or this makes sense, this negative makes sense in light of my negative behavior back here in some way, right? Everybody, and you don't only see that in their understanding on a consequential thing. I mean, if I do something stupid and immediately I get the consequences of doing something stupid, you can see the cause and effect. But how do you point to the cause and effect to these things that are decades apart, right? That becomes a little bit more, you have to be a little bit more clairvoyant to do that, right? And, but I want to say this sense of justice, it flows through everybody. I mean, the reason you have the word karma is because somebody wants to explain this, and there's no way to do it without a God in the picture, so you make up this force that creates this cause and effect kind of thing. Let me just tell you how deep this goes within me. A little bit of confession here. Monday a week ago, I was at a middle school game, and ref made a bad call, and I didn't say a lot about it at the point. I didn't make it loud. I wasn't embarrassing anybody, but I knew he made a bad call. He turns the ball over to the other team, and the other team, as they do in middle school, immediately loses the ball, right? You know what I said? Ball knows. The ball knows. The referee doesn't know, but the ball knows, okay, right? Now, what am I saying? What am I saying is that there's a principle of justice that is flowing here that I can't explain. The ref is obviously working against, and the kid, the ball understands it, you know? And we just have this sense of justice in that way that can be taken in crazy ways. And back in this, these guys are not without God. They know there is a God in the universe and that he deals with people with the principle of justice. And they're trying to figure out, and they're making statements about how that justice is happening. Now, is it possible to say, God does this to me because I did that previously, and I'm getting God's justice for what I did previously? And I would say, go ahead, Brett, you want to answer the question before me? Go ahead.
As much as the 2 points that you brought up about God and God's justice, the flip side of it, and we know when we do something wrong. We know that most of the time. Now, the other flip side we can't grapple and understand is God's grace to us. And they work simultaneously. You know, his love for us, his justice for us, his grace for us. So, but our sinful thing, like, oh, I did this, I know he's going to get me. And don't realize that at certain times, you're talking about a span of time. You don't just respond right now and then you do something and the next thing, the event that take place, oh, that's why. That's not how he functions. And but if we can confess before and realize that God, as much as justice is him, grace also is him. And there are times when you may do something and he may just hold back from what you may think you deserve and get. But at that time, that's not the time to do that for him, for his sake.
Right.
So we just don't understand it.
Yeah.
Conscience eats us up, basically.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. Marlon?
Yeah, I was just like to add, yeah. I mean, I think obviously we don't always, you know, we can think that it, you know, it may, and we may be right, you know, and we can say, you know, this might be, but to say for certain, you know, especially as time goes on, unless it's like a crime, like you stole something 10 years ago and it was found out and you got arrested. Yeah, I know it's directly because they told me this. Why.
Right. The judge will let you know the two are related.
But I will say it's interesting though, even though in this situation, what they're going through is we know the end of the story. So this is temporary. What they're saying is because of what they did to Joseph. Because Joseph is the one who's actually in place, who's actually carried this stuff out.
Right.
And so they're actually right. Everything that they're going through is directly because of what they did to Joseph. So even though we know ultimately this is going to be a temporary thing or whatever, I don't think we can say for certain, you know, when this happens to us, this is because of this, but it's just interesting that they actually are correct.
Well, yeah, and think of how many levels God's working here.
Right.
I mean, you know, he's working on Joseph all the time. You just see him walking with Joseph completely on that level. He's working on a family level within this family, some in Canaan, some in Egypt. He's working. I mean, why does he bring a famine to the known world at that time?
To save them.
You know, God is he works on every dimension all the time. And the only thing you can rightly say is, this is the will of God. Whatever this is, it's the will of God. Now, do you want to know why God is doing what he's doing? I got no help for you. I can't tell you why God does what he does. Why are you sitting there and not, why am I standing here and not my brothers who I grew up in the same house with? I don't know. Why is one of them saved and I'm saved and the other one may be saved and my cousins are not? I don't know. You know, why God does what he does, I don't know. That he does it, I'm certain about that. I'm certain about that. Now, you would be on a fool's errand to say this happened because of that in the mind of God. I had a friend who wrote a book that said something, I mean, it's bad because he's my friend, I can't think of the title, but it was something like 20 reasons things happen from Scripture. And what it does is he looks at bad things that happen and why they happened, and he found 20 reasons, all right? Now, which one of those 20 happened to be this situation? How are you going to know, right? Even the fact that you talk about this as punishment when you're also dealing with a merciful God is questionable. You know, that all you see as punishment and not mercies is blind. That you can point to one thing and say God did this because of that is making yourself equivalent to read God's mind, whatever that takes, right? And that's just not good.
You know, reading this, I'm thinking about Jacob and the fact that they have a dysfunctional family.
Yeah.
And it just reminds me of situations of today.
Yeah.
Where there are many dysfunctional families. Yeah. And what God is trying to do with that family was so dysfunctional.
And I mean, if you want a finger point, Jacob's a pretty dysfunctional guy from the beginning to the end, you know. I mean, you might think, man, this is cruel for Joseph to do this to his father. You should have seen what Jacob did to his dad, you know. I mean, this thing goes deep. It goes deep. And when you start pointing fingers, you're going to recognize the only hope is a merciful God. Everybody's a perpetrator. Everybody's a victim. That's what it boils down to.
And when you do the perpetration, though, it's worse than when I do it. That's our mindset.
Yeah.
In other words, when I'm the victim, what you did to me is actually worse than me and what I actually did to other people. Because no matter what your situation is, like you said, depending on what story you want to tell, is going to be the role that you actually play in the story. Are you the victim in this instance? Are you the perpetrator? Because you're actually both. Yeah. In different situations.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I appreciate what Ruben's saying here, but do you think his dad is going to kill his grandchildren because Reuben fails? So that's not going to help, you know. That's a good vow, but it's not going to help, you know. And so verse 38, the price is just too high for Jacob. Jacob said, my son will not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he alone is left. If harm should befall him on the journey you are taking, then you will bring my gray hair down to Sheol in sorrow. Okay? This should sound pretty shocking to you. It's shocking, I think, for him to say it. It obviously gives you a good sense of where his mind is at. Jacob has always played favorites with his son, and he's continued to do it now with these guys. I mean, he literally says in front of the boys, Benjamin alone is left. All right? That's something crazy to say in front of all your sons. Benjamin alone is left, right? Yeah, this dude's sorrow is deep, and his dysfunction is just as deep, right? And
do you think Benjamin was aware that they had sold Joseph
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, he at least heard the story his dad heard. I don't know if he knew any more than that.
So there's no indication he was present.
Yeah, whenever it talks about those brothers doing that, it just talks about them being a whole group,
Right.
and it doesn't leave Benjamin out of the story. That's all I know to say about that exactly. But what's clear here is Jacob's not going to risk Benjamin to get Simeon back. Simeon's going to stay there. If the price is Benjamin, Simeon's going to stay there. And it's not even the price is Benjamin. The price is possibly Benjamin. I mean, he doesn't hold any hope that Reuben's version could work out. Where I go down there, I show him to the guy, we convince him we're brothers, and I get both my brothers and bring them home, and everybody lives happily ever after. Jacob's not believing in that kind of dream, that kind of pipe dream. That's not even on his table. Yeah, I think they're considered the whole group at that point. You know, it's kind of hard in families back then because they spoke very holistically of everybody and didn't take sight of individuals. And if you belong to the family, you're in the family, you know, and whatever happens to the family happens to you, that kind of stuff. So it's hard to say what each individual looked like at that time, maybe. Marlon, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I know we don't know the age where he says. I mean, as far as Benjamin, we don't know the age, but it's interesting that he wasn't with them when they went. So I mean, like if he was super young, where the father's like, no, you're not you're not taking him. I mean, we don't know if that's the case, but it's just interesting that, in other words, why he wasn't with them in the first place. And it's interesting that that the father kept the youngest, you know, with him. Again, I don't know if that was his doing or if it just played out like that. It's interesting.
So you see at the beginning of the verse, Jacob doesn't allow Benjamin to go. Here at the beginning of the chapter, verse 4, he doesn't allow Benjamin to go, as Marlon points out. Down here at the bottom, verse 38, he's not letting Benjamin go, right? Now, think about this. What's the bigger picture here? This is the family of God at this point. These are the children of Abraham. These are the only people on earth who are living under the Abrahamic promise, okay? They're the focus of the covenant at this time. And they have been incredibly immoral people for being chosen people over the years, right? And we've seen these guys act incredibly scandalous. And this chapter is a test, as Joseph says. What I think he's testing is, what are my brothers like now? What kind of people are these? I knew them 20 years ago. I was a victim of them 20 years ago. But who are they now? Let me put some pressure on them and find out what kind of men they are, right? And I think that's what he's really testing, is to see what his brothers are like. And when he breaks down in prison and starts to cry and hides that from them, he's recognizing these are changed men. They're not the guys who did to me what they did before. And, there's some irony here. The brothers oppressed Joseph, and now he's oppressing them. They'd imprisoned Joseph, but he's imprisoning them. Joseph's spying on them, but he accuses them of being spies, And I don't think this is completely lost on them when they remember what they did to Joseph, as they do here. And that in the end, I think we know that Joseph is testing them by putting them in danger. But I think what the test is squeezing them to see what their character is like at this point. And the verse 15 said it was testing, you just don't know why. But notice the difference in these two verses. I'm going to read something from Genesis 37, verse 20. It says, this is the men, the younger men at this point. They say, now then, come and let us kill him and throw him into one of these pits, and we will say a wild beast devoured him, and then let us see what will become of his dreams. That's them 20 years ago, maybe a little bit more. Now Genesis 42:21. Then they said to one another, truly we are guilty concerning our brother, because we saw the distress of his soul when he pleaded with us, yet we would not listen. Therefore, this distress has come upon us. That's hard to believe, that those two things came out of the same mouths, but it did. And so you can see there's a lot of maturity, a lot of repentance between these two verses. And we really don't even have any idea what these guys have been doing since chapter 37. But we can say that their consciences have been engaged at this point. And we can see that that's shown by evidence, by the way Joseph put pressure on them. And so I think Reuben in here demonstrates, I don't think he's special compared to all of them. I think he more vocally demonstrates where their mind is now, that they are sorry, they do regret, and they would give anything to be able to undo the kind of thing they did. And he actually talks ridiculously, but I think he reflects where their minds were at this time. So the problem's not solved. The problem is still the problem. Simeon is still in prison. Joseph's still anonymous to his brothers, and the famine's not over, right? And so the next chapter pretty much butts up against this one, and you have to read them together. Our problem is we're out of time. And our second problem is we're not going to be here next week for this. We're going to be here for Missions Emphasis Week. Hugh and Beverly are going to take the mic at that point. The following week, we'll do the next chapter. So if you want to read ahead and gather your thoughts and ideas and questions, we're going into 43 in 2 weeks, okay? Anything you need to be said other than that? Oh, yes, after that chapter, we have one more Sunday in November. That's November 30th. We'll meet here, and that will be the last day of our split Sunday schools. And on the 30th, what we're going to do is do a review of where we've been that will cover through, in Joseph's life, through chapter 43. And then next year, we're going to pick up this theme again. So we're going to do 43, stop there, review everything, and then pick up 44 next year. Okay? When we split again. All right? Let me pray and get you where you belong. Father, I thank you for this time. I thank you for Joseph's story. I thank you for the way that it's not just a soap opera. It's not just an interesting novel of people in the desert. This is your word, and we recognize that with all the goings on of the brothers, of the father, of Joseph, that the true character, the main character of this story is you and what you're doing. And we have to say that your plan is marvelous, that it's full of ups and downs, but it accomplishes what it's supposed to accomplish. And thinking of this in terms of the Abrahamic covenant, Lord, you are weaving an incredible story here. And it helps us to recognize that your will is still being carried out. Your calling is still upon us. We are under a new covenant, and it has ramifications for how we live. Lord, we ask that we might learn something from these men literally living millennia ago under your sovereignty would have some effect on how we live under your sovereignty now. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.